There is a question that no one asks at baby showers. No one asks it in parenting classes or obstetric consultations or the cheerful pastel-colored books that tell you what to expect when you're expecting. The question is this: for most of human history, across most of the world's cultures, what happened when two babies came out instead of one? The modern answer is celebration. Twins are special. Twins are a blessing. Twins are dressed in matching outfits and photographed for social media and marveled at by strangers in grocery stores. The modern world treats twins as a delightful anomaly, a doubling of joy, a genetic curiosity that produces cute content and heartwarming stories. The modern world has no framework for what I found when I started looking at how the rest of human history treated the arrival of two children where one was expected. Because for most of recorded history, in most cultures that documented their practices, twins were not a blessing. They were an abomination, a curse, a sign of spiritual contamination, sexual transgression, or demonic interference. And the response, across cultures that had no contact with each other, separated by oceans and millennia, was remarkably, disturbingly consistent. One of them had to go. I need you to sit with that before I continue. Not as an abstraction, not as an anthropological curiosity filed under interesting cultural differences. As a reality, as something that happened to real infants, born alive, healthy, breathing, and designated for elimination because they were the second one through the door. Because in culture after culture, across continent after continent, the second twin was considered dangerous, unnatural, wrong. And the methods of dealing with the wrongness ranged from exposure, leaving the infant in the wilderness to die, to direct killing, to banishment, to elaborate ritual procedures designed to cleanse the community of the pollution that a twin birth was believed to produce. This raises a simple but critical question. Why? What is it about twins that triggered such a universal, visceral, cross-cultural response of horror? The official anthropological explanation is superstition. Pre-scientific cultures didn't understand the biology of multiple births. They interpreted the unusual event through their existing spiritual frameworks. In some cultures, twins were believed to be the result of adultery, the logic being that two children must have two fathers. In others, twins were believed to be evidence of contact with spirits, one child human, one child something else. In others, the birth of twins was interpreted as a fracture in the natural order, a doubling that violated the expected pattern of one mother, one child, one soul. And these explanations are documented. They appear in the ethnographic literature. Missionaries, colonial administrators, and anthropologists recorded these beliefs across Africa, South America, Southeast Asia, Australia, and indigenous North America. The beliefs are real, the practices are real, the explanations given by the cultures themselves are real. But the deeper I looked, the more I found that the explanations given by the cultures don't explain the universality. Superstition is local. It develops within specific contexts, specific environments, specific cosmological frameworks. The taboo against twins isn't local, it's global. It appears in cultures that had zero contact with each other, cultures that developed completely independent cosmologies, completely independent social structures, completely independent explanations for natural phenomena, independently arrived at the same conclusion about twins. That they were dangerous, that one had to be removed. The pattern repeats with unsettling precision across every inhabited continent. In the Igbo culture of southeastern Nigeria, twins were traditionally killed at birth and their bodies discarded in the evil forest, a designated area outside the community where cursed and contaminated things were placed. The practice was so deeply embedded that when the first European missionaries arrived and began rescuing twin infants, the local population's horror was directed not at the killing of children, but at the missionaries' willingness to bring cursed beings into their homes. The missionaries were considered either ignorant or insane. In the culture of certain indigenous groups of the Pacific Northwest, twin births were surrounded by elaborate taboos. The twins and their mother were isolated from the community. Specific rituals were required to contain the spiritual danger. In some groups, one twin was given away or abandoned to reduce the threat. In ancient Rome, twin births were considered omens. The mythology surrounding Romulus and Remus, the twin founders of Rome, one of whom kills the other, has been interpreted by scholars as a mythologized version of the twin taboo. The founding story of Western civilization encodes at its very origin the principle that when there are two, one must be destroyed. In pre-colonial cultures across East Africa, Southern Africa, and parts of West Africa, twin killing or twin abandonment was practiced with variation but remarkable consistency. In Madagascar, in parts of what is now Ghana, among certain groups in the Congo Basin, the specifics varied, the principle didn't. Twins were wrong. The wrongness had to be corrected. The correction was the removal of at least one child. The silence was deafening when I started looking for the scope of these practices, because the anthropological literature documents them extensively, but treats them as isolated cultural phenomena. Each culture's twin taboo is described and analyzed within the context of that culture's specific belief system. The Igbo practice is explained through Igbo cosmology. The Roman mythology is explained through Roman religion. The Pacific Northwest taboos are explained through indigenous spiritual frameworks. Each explanation is culturally specific, and the question that none of them addresses is why all of these culturally specific frameworks arrived at the same answer, as if they were following instructions they didn't fully understand. Here's where the investigation took a turn I wasn't expecting. Because when I started looking at the twin taboo not as a collection of isolated cultural practices but as a global pattern, I found that the taboo wasn't just about killing or abandoning twins. In many cultures, it was about something much more specific. It was about identity, about the danger of duplication, about the existential threat posed by two beings who are the same. In multiple African traditions, the fear surrounding twins was explicitly connected to the soul. The belief was that one body should house one soul. Two identical bodies created a crisis of identity. Which one had the soul? Which one was real? Which one was the copy, the duplicate, the thing that looked human but wasn't? The twin taboo in these frameworks wasn't about population control or sexual morality. It was about ontology, about what it means to be a unique individual, about the fundamental assumption shared across cultures worldwide that each human being is singular, unrepeatable, one. The deeper I went into the philosophical dimensions of the twin taboo, the more I found that the fear of duplication wasn't limited to twins. It extended to mirrors, to shadows, to reflections in water, to anything that produced a double of a living person. Cultures across the world developed taboos around reflections. The belief that a mirror could capture your soul. The fear of seeing your double, your doppelganger, which in European folklore was an omen of death. The global discomfort with duplication runs deeper than any single cultural expression of it. It's as if the human psyche, at some fundamental level, recognizes the duplicate as a threat, not a practical threat, an existential one. And twins are the ultimate duplication, not a reflection that vanishes when you step away from the mirror, not a shadow that dissolves when the light changes, a permanent, living, breathing duplicate that grows beside you, that shares your face, that exists as a walking challenge to your singularity. The twin taboo might not be about superstition at all. It might be about the deepest possible human anxiety, the anxiety of not being unique. Now, the erasure. Because what happened to the twin taboo across the last 2 centuries is as revealing as the taboo itself. Missionaries were the first to systematically disrupt twin-killing practices, beginning in the mid-1800s. In West Africa, particularly in Nigeria, Christian missionaries made the rescue of twins a central part of their project. Mary Slessor, a Scottish missionary who worked in Calabar in the late 1800s, became famous for rescuing twin infants from communities that would have killed them. Her work is celebrated in missionary histories as a triumph of Christian compassion over pagan cruelty. And it was compassion. The saving of infant lives is unambiguously good. I'm not questioning the morality of the intervention. I'm questioning the completeness of the narrative that followed it. Because the missionary intervention didn't just stop twin killing, it erased the framework within which twins had been understood for millennia. The missionaries didn't study the twin taboo. They didn't ask why it existed across so many cultures. They didn't investigate the cosmological, philosophical, or experiential dimensions of a practice that had persisted for longer than Christianity itself had existed. They declared it evil. They stopped it. And they replaced it with the Christian understanding of twins as a blessing from God, a gift, a cause for celebration. The replacement was total. Within a generation of missionary contact, communities that had practiced twin taboos for centuries had adopted the Christian framework. The old understanding wasn't debated, it wasn't preserved, it wasn't examined, it was overwritten, and the overwriting was so complete that today, in many of the same communities where twins were once killed, the historical practice is a source of shame so deep that elders refuse to discuss it. The memory is there. The willingness to explore it isn't. The official explanation collapses here because the missionary narrative frames the twin taboo as simple barbarism overcome by enlightened compassion. But that narrative requires us to believe that dozens of cultures, independently, across every continent, developed the same barbaric practice for no meaningful reason, that the most cross-culturally consistent human behavioral pattern outside of language and music was nothing more than ignorance, that the taboo carried no information, encoded no knowledge, reflected no understanding that might have been worth preserving even as the practice itself was rightly ended. The deeper I went, the more I found traces of something beneath the taboo that the missionaries never investigated and the anthropologists never fully explored. Because in many cultures, the twin taboo was accompanied by a body of knowledge about twins that goes beyond simple fear. Knowledge about the relationship between twins, about the ways twins communicate, about the psychic and emotional connections between identical individuals that modern science is only beginning to document. Go read the current research on twin telepathy, on the documented phenomenon of identical twins experiencing physical sensations when the other twin is injured, on the studies showing that separated identical twins, raised in completely different environments, make remarkably similar life choices, develop similar habits, marry similar people, name their children similar names. The scientific literature treats these findings as curiosities, interesting but unexplained, not important enough to restructure our understanding of human identity and individuality. But what if the ancient cultures that feared twins knew something about these connections that we've dismissed as superstition? What if the taboo wasn't just about fear of the duplicate, but about knowledge of the connection? Knowledge that two beings who share the same body, the same genetic code, the same moment of creation, are linked in ways that challenge the fundamental assumption of individual autonomy that every human society is built on. The pattern repeats with unsettling precision when you look at how twins were treated in the cultures that didn't kill them. Because not every culture practiced twin elimination. Some cultures did the opposite. They venerated twins. The Yoruba of Nigeria, who have the highest natural twinning rate in the world, developed an elaborate spiritual framework around twins, the Abeji tradition, that treated them as sacred beings with special powers. In some South American indigenous cultures, twins were considered shamanic, connected to the spirit world in ways that singletons were not. In these cultures, the twin wasn't a threat. The twin was a bridge, a being who existed in two places at once. A living demonstration that individual identity was more fluid, more connected, more mysterious than ordinary experience suggested. Fear and veneration, killing and worship, opposite responses to the same phenomenon. And both responses, the negative and the positive, share the same underlying recognition that twins are different, that the existence of a biological duplicate raises questions about identity, individuality, and the nature of the self that no culture has been able to ignore. Here's what I keep returning to: the erasure, not the erasure of the killing practice, which should have been stopped, the erasure of the knowledge, the erasure of the questions, the millennium-spanning cross-cultural investigation of what it means to be duplicated, what it means to share an identity, what it means for two bodies to carry what was expected to be one soul. That investigation, conducted across thousands of years by dozens of independent cultures, was declared superstition and overwritten with a greeting card. Twins are a blessing. Dress them in matching outfits. Move on. I'm not telling you twins should be feared. I'm not telling you any culture was right to kill infants. I'm asking why the most universal human taboo outside of incest, a taboo documented across every inhabited continent, maintained for millennia by cultures with no contact, a taboo that encoded sophisticated questions about identity and duplication and the nature of the self, was erased without investigation. I'm asking what those cultures knew about twins that made the taboo so persistent and so universal. I'm asking what knowledge was buried when the practice was stopped and the framework was overwritten. I'm asking what twins are, not biologically, but ontologically, that every ancient culture on Earth recognized and that modern culture has decided isn't worth asking about. Handed a congratulations card and told it was the whole story. What else have we been handed and never thought to question?